Good morning, friends. Important video on clarification issued by Ministry of Finance Revenue Department with a service tax or GST leviable on liquidated damage, penalty, compensation for breach of contract or violation of any law. As we all know in the background, that para 5E under schedule 2 of CGST Act, which says agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or situation or to do an act, para 5E schedule 2. And schedule 2, fortunately, with effect from 1st July 2017, is to be used only for determining whether a particular supply is a supply of goods or supply of services. So schedule 2 only for determination whether it is supply of goods or supply of services. So para 5E, which I referred, agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or situation or to do an act is a supply of service. But importantly, we were all debating under divergent judgment and litigation and divergent advance ruling also. Some judgment are in favor of a taxpayer and some judgment and advance ruling are against taxpayer. And we have seen a lot of advance ruling contrary, and wherein it is being ruled that GST leviable even on liquidated damage. So problem here, and that is being clarified by way of circular number 178 dated 3rd of August 2022. We were all talking, and certain example which I am giving you, that any liquidated damage, compensation or penalty paid for breach of any contract or violation of any contract or any law per se, whether chargeable to service tax or GST. Second example could be notice paid salary paid by employee to the employer or employer to the employee in lieu of employment contract, which is falling under schedule 3 entry 1, neither a supply of goods nor supply of services, but debate was on whether service tax or GST leviable on such notice paid salary. Third example could be that check dishonor, and then you pay certain fine and penalty. There's a check dishonor of a check, and you pay then certain penalty or fine because of dishonor of check, whether GST or service tax leviable. And we have seen certain times cancellation of any license, and for that cancellation compensation is being paid, whether GST leviable. And these were the example, and we were saying and debating. Lot of my videos available on my YouTube channel, and we were saying that this is not chargeable to service tax or GST for the region. And fortunate part, this circular is clarifying this position. What is being clarified? What is the meaning of service? When we go back to service tax regime, meaning of service means any activity carried out by a person for another for consideration. So any activity which is being carried out by a person for another for consideration. So there is express or implied contract, and the meaning of contract as defined under Indian Contract Act 1872 is being considered in this circular for giving the clarification. So whenever there is any breach of contract, any violation of law, do we really enter into for the breaching of the contract or violation of any contract or law? And notice pay salary, do we really enter for, leaving the job without serving notice pay or notice period? We never intended for that. Whenever any cancellation of any license is happening, it is not for the cancellation we are entering into. It is only a condition to the contract, breach of contract, and for that compensation is being paid. Service tax and GST should not be levied. Lot of judgment in our favor and against the taxpayer as well. And this is the clarity, and I must appreciate this circular number 178 detailed out very clearly that no service tax, no GST unless there is agreed, express and implied contract. Any activity carried out by a person for another for consideration. And whenever we talk about liquidated damage, compensation or penalty for any breach of contract, this is only as a condition to contract. If there is any breach, this is being paid. So none is entering into for breaching of contract. It is only compensation to make other party good for the loss suffered by him. That is what the context. So we were saying neither service tax nor GST leviable. And this circular is clarifying. So para 5E, again I'm coming back. And when I go back to GST regime and look at the supply definition under section 7 subsection 1, supply includes all forms of supply of goods or services or both, such as sell, transfer, barter, exchange, licensing, leasing, renting, disposal, made or agreed to be made for a consideration by a person in the course of furtherance of business. And even supply definition says any activity carried out by a person for another for consideration, whether express or implied contract. So whenever we talk about liquidated damage or we talk about compensation or penalty, we never get into a contract for violation. And whatever compensation or liquidated damage are being paid, it is just because there is a breach of contract, conditions are violated, and thereby we are compensating other party for the loss incurred by him. Having said that, the fortunate part, Schedule 2 is being delinked from the supply definition with retrospective date July 1, 2017. So in GST, if at all you are looking at Schedule 2, it is only for determining classification. Either it is a supply of goods or supply of services. So para 5E of Schedule 2, though it is supply of service, but it is chargeable to GST only when it is satisfying the condition and definition of supply as given under section 7 subsection 1. That's what we have to look into. So let's analyze, and circular has also analyzed those propositions, and it is being stated in that circular. What is the meaning? Example: agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act. What could be an example? So example given, non-compete agreement. So a particular party agree for the non-compete in a particular area for the particular product or for the particular services, and he's being paid a certain amount. That may fall into this category, agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act. That is chargeable to GST because that is being agreed upon to refrain from an act. Or another example which is being given, a builder which is allowed to construct up to 30 floor, 30. But he is agreed that he will not construct more than 25th floor, though he is being permitted by municipal authority. So 5 floor which he is not constructing, he is being paid. refrain from an act, and that may be chargeable to GST. Second proposition, agreeing to the obligation to tolerate an act or situation. To tolerate an act or situation. What could be the example? A hawker who is putting his shop on the common pavement, common road in front of his shop, and he is paying certain amount for that to the shop owner. That may be the example. Another example, that there is a school running in a particular RWA area, nearby RWA area, and school is using the loudspeaker. So that is being permitted by the RWA to the school. For during school hours, they can run their loudspeaker on particular amount to be paid to the RWA. Tolerate an act. Agreeing to the obligation to do an act, third component. So there are three components. Agreeing to the obligation to do an act. What could be the situation? An example given in the circular, that any industrial unit putting up, installing any equipment for zero emissions, even though they are within the limit, but still they are putting up, and that is at the behest of RWA, and the amount is being paid. That may fall under agreeing to the obligation to do an act. So these are the examples given, and it is being clarified in the circular in very clear terms. Whenever there is any breach of contract, violation of contract, or violation of any law, and for that you are paying any liquidated damage, compensation or penalty, no GST, no service tax. Notice pay salary paid by employee to the employer or employer to the employee in lieu of employment contract, no GST, no service tax. Dishonor of a check, and there are the charges for dishonor of a check, no GST, no service tax. Any license got cancelled and compensation is being paid, no service tax, no GST. And some example, it is being stated in the circular that may be liable to GST, like late payment charges. So whenever due date and customer is not paying by due date, then there are late charges, late fees. That will be continue to be chargeable to GST, and it will fall under the same category, same classification, on the basis of which principal supply is taxable. So late charges or late fees may be when we are not making payment by due date for electricity, water, or any maintenance fees. So chargeable as per the principal supply in same category. Then the cancellation charges may be air, railway, hotel, and these cancellation charges are charged to facilitate the customer. They can cancel within the stipulated specified time period that is being considered, it is agreed upon. Hence thereby chargeable, and chargeable as per the category on which principal supply is chargeable. That GST rate going to be applicable. But important and very, very important, this circular is clarifying a lot of position and has come out with crystal clear terms. No service tax, no GST. On liquidated damage, compensation and penalty. For breach of contract or violation of any contract or any levy for violation of any law. So compensation paid for that. Not chargeable to service tax and GST. But one important point where I wanted to have clarity, which is not there in the circular. So my humble submission would be, we have seen that prior to this circular, there were divergent judgment in favor of a taxpayer against the taxpayer. and somewhere they have collected, government has collected the service tax and GST on such liquidated damage, compensation which is being paid, or penalty which is being paid. If that is not chargeable to service tax and GST, which is clarified now, and government has collected the money which is without authority of law, are you going to refund the money? And this money should be refunded back to the person who has paid the tax amount. Of course, incidence of tax must not be passed on to the other person. So the person who has paid the tax from his own pocket and incidence is not passed on, then whatever government has collected, they must refund back the money, because it is being collected without authority of law in terms of Article 265 to the Constitution of India. I must compliment Ministry of Finance, Revenue Department, CBIC, for issuing this circular, clarifying the position, and explain a lot of example in this particular circular, which is there in description box. You can download and run through. But appreciating one, thumbs up for the refund component, where tax are being collected without authority of law and incidence is not passed on, they must get back their money. That is important aspect which is not being clarified. Look forward for such clarification as well. Thanks. But in Hindi little bit, let me also say to my all Hindi viewers, ये dispute होता था ना कि सर्विस टैक्स या GST लगेगा लिक्विडेटेड डैमेज पे, कंपेंसेशन जब हम देते हैं, पेनाल्टी देते हैं फॉर ब्रीच ऑफ एनी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट या वायोलेशन ऑफ एनी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट और एनी लॉ फॉर द टाइम बीइंग इन फोर्स, सर्विस टैक्स या GST लगेगा। पैरा 5E ऑफ शेड्यूल 2 था जो कहता था एग्रीइंग टू द ऑब्लिगेशन टू रिफ्रेन फ्रॉम एन एक्ट और टू टॉलरेट एन एक्ट और सिचुएशन or to do enact, para 5E schedule 2. Schedule 2 fortunately from July 1 2017 आपको सिर्फ इसलिए देखना है कि आपकी पर्टिकुलर सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स है या सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज है, इसीलिए आपको देखना है। जब तक ये सप्लाई की डेफिनेशन में फॉल नहीं करता सेक्शन 7 सब सेक्शन 1, तब तक GST नहीं लग सकता। इवन सर्विस टैक्स रेजीम में हम जाएं और सर्विस की डेफिनेशन देखें तो सर्विस की डेफिनेशन थी एनी एक्टिविटी कैरिड आउट बाय ए पर्सन फॉर अनदर फॉर कंसिडरेशन, यानी वहां पे हम एग्री करते थे कि मैं आपके लिए काम करूंगा एंड दैट फॉर कंसिडरेशन। इट मे बी एक्सप्रेस और इम्प्लाइड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, एंड कॉन्ट्रैक्ट की मीनिंग एंड डेफिनेशन जो इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट 1872 से आती है, इसको इस सर्कुलर में क्लैरिफाई किया गया। सर्कुलर नंबर 178 डेटेड 3 अगस्त 2022। और उन्हें कहा, कई एग्जाम्पल भी लिए, कई एग्जाम्पल हमारे लिए भी थे कि आपने कोई ब्रीच ऑफ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया या कोई लॉ का वायोलेशन किया, उसके लिए आपने लिक्विडेटेड डैमेज कॉम्पेंसेशन दिया आपने, या पेनाल्टी दी आपने, या लाइसेंस किसी का कैंसिल किया गया तो उसके लिए कॉम्पेंसेशन दिया गया। नोटिस पे सैलरी होती थी, पेड बाय एम्प्लॉय टू द एम्प्लॉयर और एम्प्लॉयर टू द एम्प्लॉय इन lieu ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, एंड दैट इज नाइदर ए सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स नॉर सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज एज पर शेड्यूल 3। डिसऑनरिंग ऑफ चेक, जिसके लिए आप सर्टेन पेनाल्टी या चार्जेस देते थे। तो इन्हें क्लैरिफाई किया सर्कुलर के अंदर कि इनके ऊपर सर्विस टैक्स और GST नहीं लगेगा। क्वाइट ऑब्वियस, क्या हम कभी इस कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में इंटर करते हैं कि मैं वायोलेट करूंगा, मैं ब्रीच करूंगा? इट इज ओनली कंडीशन टू ए कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ कंडीशन टू कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लिक्विडेटेड डैमेज दिए जाते थे, कंपेंसेशन दिया जाता था, पेनाल्टी दी जाती थी, जस्ट टू कंपेंसेट लॉस इंकर्ड बाय द अदर पार्टी। यही होता था ना। पर हम इंटर थोड़ी करते थे कि मैं तुम्हारे लिए ब्रीच करूंगा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को, वायोलेट करूंगा कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को, या लॉ का वायोलेशन करूंगा। कभी इसके लिए हम इंटर करते थे क्या? नहीं करते थे। नोटिस पे सैलरी इन lieu ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट होता था, अब लाइसेंस किसी का आपने कैंसिल कर दिया, इंटेंशन, कभी कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इसलिए एंटर होते हैं कि हम लाइसेंस आपका कैंसिल कर देंगे, एंड कॉम्पेंसेशन इसलिए दिया जाता है कि लाइसेंस आपका हमने कैंसिल कर दिया, अब आप एक कॉम्पेंसेशन ले लीजिए, टू कॉम्पेंसेट द लॉस सफर्ड बाय द अदर पार्टी। यही होता था ना। तो इन्हें एग्जाम्पल भी दिए, ऑब्लिगेशन, एग्रीइंग टू द ऑब्लिगेशन टू रिफ्रेन फ्रॉम एन एक्ट। क्या एग्जाम्पल हो सकते हैं? नॉन कॉम्पीट एग्रीमेंट, यानी एक पार्टी एग्री करती है कि मैं आपके साथ कॉम्पीट नहीं करूंगा फॉर पर्टिकुलर पीरियड, गुड्स, सर्विसेज, कुछ भी हो सकता है। एंड कॉम्पेंसेशन, कुछ आपने अमाउंट तय किया और वो आपने नॉन कॉम्पीट के लिए दिया आपने। ऐसा भी हो सकता है जब हम रिफ्रेन फ्रॉम एन एक्ट की जब हम बात करते हैं, और समझना पड़ेगा जो बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट है जिसको हम समझना चाहें कि आप इस काम को नहीं करेंगे तो आपको एक कॉम्पेंसेशन दिया जाएगा। एग्रीइंग टू द ऑब्लिगेशन टू टॉलरेट एन एक्ट और ए सिचुएशन। सो टॉलरेट में क्या हो सकता है? टॉलरेट में ये होता है कि कई बार हॉकर है, आप देखते हैं स्ट्रीट के ऊपर हॉकर लगाते हैं अपनी दुकान, कॉमन रोड के ऊपर, इन फ्रंट ऑफ शॉप लगा लेते हैं। शॉप ओनर ने एग्री कर लिया कि ठीक है लगाओ, पर मुझे कुछ चार्जेस देने पड़ेंगे। सो टॉलरेट एन एक्ट, ये एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने डाला। एक RWA एरिया के पास स्कूल है, स्कूल का लाउड स्पीकर बज रहा है, नॉइस पॉल्यूशन हो रही है, बट RWA ने एग्री कर लिया कि ठीक है आप बजाओ, बट वी नीड सर्टेन चार्जेस। ये एग्जाम्पल इस सर्कुलर के अंदर डाले गए हैं। एग्रीइंग टू द ऑब्लिगेशन टू डू एन एक्ट, टू डू एन एक्ट एक एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने डाला कि इंडस्ट्रियल यूनिट है, RWA एरिया के पास है, तो RWA ने कहा कि भैया आपको एक इक्विपमेंट फॉर एमिशन लगाना पड़ेगा, इवन दो दे आर विद इन द लिमिट, बट डू एन एक्ट फॉर सर्टेन अमाउंट। ये एग्जाम्पल उन्होंने डाले और क्लैरिफाई किया है सर्कुलर के अंदर, लाउडेबल वन, के ब्रीच ऑफ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, वायोलेशन ऑफ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, वायोलेशन ऑफ एनी लॉ, डिसऑनर ऑफ ए चेक, नोटिस पे, सैलरी विच आई एम रेफरिंग टू, इन सब के ऊपर नो सर्विस टैक्स, नो GST, गुड वन। पर कुछ एग्जाम्पल उन्हें और भी डाले कि अगर आपने लेट पेमेंट चार्जेस दिए बिकॉज आप ड्यू डेट तक पेमेंट नहीं करते थे, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, वाटर, मेंटेनेंस, उस पर GST लगेगा, सर्विस टैक्स लगेगा, और उसी कैटेगरी में लगेगा जो प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई है, उसी के GST रेट लगेंगे। कई बार हम कैंसिलेशन कराते हैं ना, रेलवे की टिकट, एयर टिकट, होटल एकोमोडेशन, GST लगेगा, बिकॉज दैट इज बीइंग एग्रीड अपॉन विद इन स्टिपुलेटेड टाइम पीरियड, आप कैंसिल करा सकते हैं। तो सप्लायर ने सारा अरेंजमेंट किया हुआ है आपके लिए पहले उसने सारी बुकिंग की है, इंकर्ड किया, अब आप कैंसिल कराएंगे तो कैंसिलेशन, उस पर GST लगेगा, एंड इन द सेम कैटेगरी जो प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई है उसके GST रेट लगेंगे। बट मैंने यही कहना है कि अगर ये पॉइंट डिस्प्यूटेड था और ये सर्कुलर आया, लाउडेबल वन, हमने देखा लॉट ऑफ जजमेंट आपने देखे होंगे टैक्स पेयर के फेवर में है, टैक्स पेयर के अगेंस्ट में है। अब क्वेश्चन ये है कि पास पीरियड के लिए जब तक ये सर्कुलर नहीं था, अगर आपने सर्विस टैक्स या GST पे कर दिया जिस पे GST या सर्विस टैक्स नहीं लगना था, सो दैट इज विदाउट अथॉरिटी ऑफ लॉ, आपने ले लिया, क्योंकि लिक्विडेटेड डैमेज कंपेंसेशन जो आपने दिया या पेनाल्टी दी उस पर नहीं लगना था। गवर्नमेंट अथॉरिटी ने आपसे कलेक्ट कर लिया, इट विल कंटिन्यू टू बी विदाउट अथॉरिटी ऑफ लॉ। अगर आपने इंसिडेंस पास ऑन नहीं किया है, यू हैव ऑल राइट कि आपको रिफंड मिले, बट एक क्लैरिटी और क्लैरिफिकेशन आना जरूरी था जो इस सर्कुलर में नहीं है। सो माय सबमिशन कि जब आपने सर्विस टैक्स, GST इस अमाउंट पे लिक्विडेटेड डैमेज पेनाल्टी which is in lieu of breach of contract or violation of any law or violation of any contract, आपने कलेक्ट कर लिया जो आपको कलेक्ट नहीं करना था, इट इज विदाउट अथॉरिटी ऑफ लॉ, आप रिफंड दीजिए। यस, इंसिडेंट्स पास्ड ऑन नहीं होना चाहिए। सो दिस सर्कुलर इज इंपॉर्टेंट सर्कुलर। थैंक्स फॉर वॉचिंग, स्टे ट्यून, लॉट मोर on GST changes. Thank you very much.